A beautiful new week to you all, our amazing viewers. Welcome to today's newspaper review. Let's take a look at the stories dominating today's newspaper headlines. First, we'll start from the Daily Independent newspaper. On the Daily Independent newspaper, on the big page, which is written, "Early recovery in manufacturing sector faces steep hurdles." And at the top, which is written, "Sirap from Sirap to Tinubu, probe 6.79 billion naira police scam, recover missing firearms." And beside it is another headline, "Gunmen adopt 3 in Enugu church, 1 rescued." To read more on that, you go to page 7 of the Daily Independent newspaper. And still in the same newspaper, on 2027, prominent leaders ask Atiku, Obi, Makinde and others to form united oppositions. To read more on that, you go to page 7 of the newspaper. Atiku fought presidency's attack on Onayikan Bas Catholic bishops. To read more on that headline, you go to page 6 of the newspaper. And at the bottom of the newspaper, Dangote partners Sinoma in $800 million deal to double Itori cement capacity. To read more on that story, go to page 7 of the newspaper. 50 trillion naira financing gap threatens rebound of Nigeria's real sector. Away from that newspaper to the Daily Monitor. On the Daily Monitor, which is written there, from Atiku to presidency, address Catholic bishops, consigns stop attacking Onayikan. This is coming from Atiku to presidency, saying address Catholic bishops, consigns and stop attacking Onayikan. And at the top of the newspaper, reject ethnic profiling, religious hatred. Shetima urges Nigerians, this is coming from Shetima to Nigerians, that they should reject ethnic profiling and religious hatred. Still in the same newspaper, Nigerian gets $500 million for vaccines, PHC from Gavi. To read more on that story, go to page 2 of the newspaper. Soldiers, policemen killed as troops foil attack by terrorists in Zamfara. To read more on that story, go to page 4 of the newspaper. Northern Christian-backed Catholic bishops fought Bwala over divisive politics. To read more on that, you go to page 5 of the newspaper. And still in the same newspaper, on 2027 election, INEC publishes particulars of Tinubu, Atiku, Obi and others. To read more on that headline, you go to page 14 of the newspaper. At the bottom of the newspaper, which is still boldly written, presidency dismisses Atiku's 7.98 trillion naira oil windfall claim, demands evidence. Away from that newspaper to the Nigerian Tribune. On the Nigerian Tribune, which is boldly written, on 2027 election, eminent Nigerians float 100G to push for single presidential candidates. To read more on that headline, you go to page 22 of the newspaper. Again, presidency, Charles Onyanyikan. To read more on that story on presidency and Onyanyikan, you go to page 3 and 22 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. Awolowo Foundation opens nominations for 2026 Leadership Prize, Sectorial Leadership Awards. To read more on that story, go to page 6 of the newspaper. And still in the same newspaper, from Osun State, Osun, Gbenga Hashim urges Accord supporters, stakeholders to close ranks, vote for Adeleke. To read more on that headline, you go to page 23 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, Obasanjo urges church to confront insecurity, poverty with militant faith. So this is coming from the former Nigerian president, Olusegun Obasanjo. He's urging church to confront insecurity, poverty with militant faith. To read more on that, you go to page 7 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Guardian. On the Guardian newspaper, which is boldly written at the link page on page 6. 10 insurance risk liquidation as 43 scale recapitalization hurdle. 10 insurance risk liquidation as 43 scale recapitalization hurdle. To read more on that headline, you go to page 6 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper on Onanyikan, Atiku, Christian leaders, Horiwa tackle presidency. To read more on that, you go to page 6 of the newspaper. Atiku presidency, bicker over economic performance, Nigerians reality. To read more on that, you go to page 3 of the newspaper. And still in page 3 of the same newspaper, Nigeria in $15 billion flood losses as experts see wider insurance coverage. Oye warns of FS market vulnerability, high SMEs mortality. To read more on that story, go to page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Daily Trust. On the Daily Trust, which is boldly written on 2027, fresh debate over Tinubu's qualification. To read more on that story, go to page 4 and 3 of the newspaper. And at the top of the newspaper, on insecurity, bandits kill 8 family members, 4 others in Sokoto. To read more on that headline, you go to page 7 of the newspaper. Abuja infrastructure boom pushes up rents. To read more on that on Abuja infrastructure boom that have pushed up rents, you go to page 22 of the Daily Trust newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, Daily Trust economists to federal government. This is coming from Daily Trust economists to federal government. Converts gains to structural transformation. To read more on that story, go to page 23 of the newspaper. And at the bottom of the newspaper, flood displaces families, destroys houses in Yobe. In Yobe State, flood has displaced families members and has destroyed their homes and properties. To read more on that story, go to page 41 of the Daily Trust newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Vanguard newspaper. On the Vanguard newspaper, which is boldly written, 10 trillion naira investments in 13 years failed to lift power supply. To read more on that, you go to page 11 of the newspaper. And at the top of the newspaper, Dangote, Sinoma sign $800 million MOU to expand Itori cement plant capacity to 12 MTPA. To read more on that story, go to page 8 of the newspaper. Still at the top of the newspaper, presidency slams Atiku over criticism of federal government economic policies. To read more on that, go to page 8 of the newspaper. And at the bottom of the newspaper, still on Onanyikan, Northern Christians, Senator Sani order defend Catholic bishops. To read more on that, you go to page 5 of the newspaper. And on Oshunpu, plots to arrest 46 Accord leaders uncovered. This is from Oshunpu. They are planning to arrest 46 Accord leaders. To read more on that, you go to page 16 of the newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Punch newspaper. On the Punch newspaper, which is boldly written on abandoned projects, federal government bars ministries from awarding unfunded contracts. To read more on that, on federal government bans ministries from awarding unfunded contracts, to go to page 2 of the newspaper. And at the top of the newspaper, still on page 2, despite billions spent, over 6,500 PHCs still non-functional. Despite billions spent, over 6,500 PHCs still non-functional. To read more on that story, go to page 2 of the newspaper. And at the bottom of the newspaper, fake agency scandal, controversial Director General fights back, fingers more MDAs. To read more on that, you go to page 9 of the newspaper. Speeding driver killed in Lagos road crash. Speeding driver was killed in Lagos road crash. To read more on that, on speeding driver, you go to page 4 of the newspaper. And on page 33 of the same newspaper, insurance recapitalization, NICOM clears 43 insurers, reviews 8. To read more on that story, you go to page 33 of the newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the last newspaper of today, which is the First Daily newspaper. On First Daily newspaper, on gunmen storm Catholic Church, seminarian worshippers adopted in Enugu. This is coming from a Catholic church in Enugu, that seminarians and worshippers have been adopted. And still in the same newspaper, DSS vigilantes kill bandits kingpin, 60 others in Katsina. This is a good story, as DSS vigilantes has killed bandits kingpin and 60 others in Katsina State. Still in the same newspaper on Oshunpo, Adeleke camp accuses police of plotting mass arrest. Adeleke camp accuses police of plotting mass arrest. Ogun approves 450 homes road project, assembly quarters. Still in the same newspaper at the top, troops foil Zamfara base attack, rescue 9 victims. Troops have entered Zamfara based attack and they has rescued 9 victims. And still at the top of the newspaper on Wike, Amechi adds no electoral value to Atiku's ADC ticket. This is coming from the Federal Capital Territory Minister Wike, saying that Amechi adds no electoral value to Atiku's ADC tickets. Atiku to Tinubu, statistics can't hide Nigerians' hardship. This is coming from a presidential candidate, Atiku, to President Tinubu, saying that statistics can't hide Nigerians' hardship. How true is the statement? State police, Sharia Council seeks national consensus. State police, Sharia Council seeks national consensus. And the last headline for today, this is from Army. Militants surrender in Southeast. Militants have surrendered in Southeast. And that's all for today's newspaper review. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates. I'm Chidera Isum. Do have a beautiful week.